Hello, boys and girls, welcome back. We're just about to start chapter 14, and as we know, Danny and his dad are just about to start making their way into the woods. Let's go. My father came out of the caravan wearing the old navy blue sweater and the brown cloth cap with the peak pulled down low over his eyes. What's under there, Dad? I asked, seeing the bulge at his waistline. He pulled up his sweater and showed me two thin but very large white cotton sacks. They were bound neat and tidily around his belly. "To carry the stuff," he said darkly. "Aha!" I said. "Go put your sweater on," he said. "It's brown, isn't it?" "Yeah," I said. "That'll do. But take off those white trainers and wear your black shoes instead." I went into the caravan and changed my shoes and put on my sweater. When I came out again, my father was standing by the pumps, squinting anxiously up at the sun, which was now only the width of a man's hand above the line of the trees along the crest of the ridge on the far side of the valley. "I'm ready, Dad." "Good boy. Off we go." "Have you got the raisins?" I asked. "In here," he said, tapping his trouser pocket where yet another bulge was showing. "I've put them all in one bag." It was a calm sunny evening, with little wisps of brilliant white cloud hanging motionless in the sky, and the valley was cool and very quiet as the two of us began walking together along the road that ran between the hills towards Wendover. The iron thing underneath my father's foot made a noise like a hammer striking a nail each time that it landed on the road. "This is it, Danny. We're on our way," he said. "By golly, I wish my old dad were here. He'd have loved this one. He'd have given his right teeth to be here at this moment." "And Mum?" I said. "Ah, yes," and he gave a little sigh. "Your mother would have loved this one, Danny." Then he said, "Your mother was a great one for walking, Danny. She would always bring something home with her to brighten up the caravan. In summer it was wild flowers or grasses. When the grass was in seed, she could make it look absolutely beautiful in a jug of water, especially with some stalks of wheat or barley in between. In the autumn she would pick branches of leaves, and in the winter it was berries or old man's beard." We kept going. Then he said, "How do you feel, Danny?" "Terrific," I said, and I meant it, for although the snakes were still wriggling in my stomach, I wouldn't have swapped places with the King of Arabia at that moment. "Do you think they might have dug more of the holes and those pits for us to fall into?" I asked. "Don't go worrying about pits, Danny," my father said. "I'll be on the lookout for them this time. We shall go very carefully and very slowly once we're in the wood." "How dark will it be in there when we arrive?" "Not too dark," he said. "Quite light, in fact." "Then how do we stop the keepers from seeing us?" "Ah," he said, "that's the fun bit of the whole thing. That's what it's all about. It's hide and seek. It's the greatest game of hide and seek in the whole wide world." "You mean because they've got guns?" "Well," my father said, "that does add a bit of flavour to it." We didn't talk much after that, but as we got closer and closer to the wood, I could see my father becoming more and more twitchy as the excitement began to build up in him. He would get hold of some awful old tune, and instead of using the words, he would just go tum tiddly tum 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 over and over again, and then he'd get hold of another tune and go pum diddly pum pum pum. As he sang, he tried to keep time with the tap tap of his iron foot on the roadway. When he got tired of that, he said to me, "I'll tell you something interesting about pheasants, Danny. The law says that they're wild birds, so they only belong to you when they're on your land. Did you know that?" "I didn't, Dad." "So, for example, Danny, if one of Mr. Victor Hazel's pheasants flew over and perched on our filling station," my father continued, "that pheasant would belong to us. No one else would be allowed to touch it." "So you mean, Dad, even if Mr. Hazel had bought it himself as a chick, and even if he'd reared it on his own land, it would belong to us?" Absolutely, my father said. Once it flies off his or her land, he's lost it. Unless, of course, it flies back again. It's the same with fish. Once a trout or a salmon has swum out of your stretch of the river into somebody else's, you can't very well say, "Hey, that's mine, I want it back," can you? Of course not, I said. I didn't know it was like that for pheasants. It's the same with all game animals, my father said. Hare, deer, partridge, and grouse, you name it. We'd been walking steadily for about an hour and a quarter, and we were coming to the gap in the hedge where the cart track led up the hill to the big wood where the pheasants lived. We crossed over the road and we went through the gap. We walked up the cart track, and when we reached the crest of the hill, we could see the wood ahead of us, huge and dark, with the sun going down behind the trees and little sparks of gold shining through. No talking once we're inside, Danny, my father said. Keep very close to me. Try not to go snapping any branches. 5 minutes later, we were there. The wood skirted the edge of the track on the right-hand side, with only the hedge between it and us. Come on, my father said. In we go. He slipped through the hedge on all fours, and I followed. It was cool and murky inside the wood. No sunlight came in it at all. My father took me by the hand, and together we started walking forward between the trees. I was very grateful to him for holding my hand. I had wanted to take it from the moment we entered the wood, but I thought he might disapprove. My father was very tense. He was picking his feet up high and putting them down gently on the brown leaves. He kept his head moving at all times, the eyes sweeping slowly from side to side, searching for danger. I tried to do the same, but soon I began to see a keeper behind every tree, so I just gave up. We went on like this for maybe 4 or 5 minutes, going slowly deeper and deeper into the wood. Then suddenly a large patch of sky appeared ahead of us in the roof of the forest, and I knew we must almost be at the clearing. My father had told me that the clearing was the place where the young birds were introduced into the wood in early July, where they were fed and watered and guarded by the keepers, and where many of them stayed from force of habit until the shooting party began. There's plenty of pheasants in the clearing, my father had once said to me. And keepers, Dad? Yes, he had said, but there's thick bushes all around that helps. The clearing was about 100 yards ahead of us. We stopped behind a big tree while my father let his eyes travel very slowly all around. He was checking each little shadow and every part of the wood within sight. We're going to have to crawl the next bit, he whispered, letting go of my hand. Keep close behind me, Danny. Do exactly as I do. If you see me lie flat on my face, you do the same. Okay, I whispered back. Off we go then. This is it, Danny. My father got down on his hands and knees and started crawling, and I followed. He moved surprisingly fast on all fours, and I had quite a job to keep up with him. Every few seconds he would glance back at me to see if I was all right, and each time he did so, I gave him a nod and a smile. We crawled on, and then at last we were kneeling safely behind a big clump of bushes right on the edge of the clearing. My father was nudging me with his elbow and pointing through the branches at the pheasants. The place was absolutely full of them. There must have been at least 200 huge birds strutting around amongst the tree stumps. You see what I mean? He whispered. It was a fantastic sight, a poacher's dream come true. And how close they were. Some of them were not 10 paces from where we knelt. The hens were plump and creamy and brown. They were so fat, their feathers almost brushed the ground as they walked. The males were slim and elegant, with long tails and brilliant red patches around the eyes like scarlet spectacles. I glanced at my father. His face was transfixed in ecstasy. The mouth was slightly open. The eyes were sparkling bright as they stared at the pheasants. There's a keeper, he said softly. I froze. At first I didn't dare look. Over there, my father whispered. I mustn't move, I told myself, not even a head. Look carefully, over on the other side, by the big tree. Slowly, I swiveled my eyeballs in the direction he indicated. Then I saw him. Dad, I whispered. Don't move, Danny. Stay still. Yes, but Dad, it's all right, Danny. They can't see us. We crouched close to the ground, watching the keeper. He was a smallish man, with a cap on his head and a big double-barreled shotgun under his arm. He never moved. He was like a little post standing there. Should we go? I whispered. The keeper's face was shadowed by the peak of his cap, but it seemed to me he was looking straight at us. Should we go, Dad? Shh, my father said. Slowly, never taking his eyes from the keeper, he reached into his pocket and brought out a single raisin. He placed it on the palm of his hand, and then, quickly, with a little flick of the wrist, he threw the raisin into the air. I watched it as it went sailing over the bushes, and I saw it land within a yard of two hen birds standing beside an old tree stump. Both birds turned their heads sharply at the drop of the raisin. Then one of them hopped over, made a quick peck at the ground, and that must have been it. I looked at the keeper. He hadn't moved. I could feel a trickle of cold sweat running down one side of my forehead and across my cheek. I didn't dare lift a hand to wipe it away. My father threw a second raisin into the clearing, then a third, then a fourth, then a fifth. It takes guts to do that, I thought. Terrific guts. If I'd been alone, I'd never have stayed there for 1 second. But my father was in a sort of poacher's trance. For him, this was it. This was the moment of danger, the biggest thrill of all. He kept on throwing the raisins into the clearing swiftly and silently, one at a time. Up went the wrist, and up went the raisin, high over the bushes to land amongst the pheasants. Then all at once I saw the keeper turn away his head to inspect the wood behind him. My father saw this too, and quick as a flash, he pulled the bag of raisins out of his pocket and tipped the whole lot into the palm of his hand. Dad, I said, don't! But with a great sweep of the arm, he flung the entire handful of raisins way over the bushes and into the clearing. They fell with a soft little patter like raindrops on dry leaves, and every single pheasant in the place must have heard them fall. There was a flurry of wings and a rush to find the treasure. The keeper's head flicked round as though there were a spring inside his neck. The birds were all pecking away madly at the raisins. The keeper took 2 quick paces forward, and for a moment I thought he was going to investigate, but then he stopped. And his face came up, and his eyes began travelling slowly around the edge of the clearing. Lie down flat, my father whispered. Stay there. Don't move an inch. I flattened my body against the ground and pressed one side of my face into the brown leaves. The soil below the leaves had a strange, pungent smell. Out of one eye, I saw my father raise his head just a tiny bit to watch the keeper, and he kept watching him. Don't you love this? I didn't answer him. We lay there for what seemed like 100 years. At last I heard my father whisper, Panic's over. Follow me, Danny, but be extra careful. He's still there, and keep low. He started crawling quickly on his hands and knees. I went after him. I kept thinking of the keeper who was somewhere behind us. I was very conscious of that keeper, and I was also very conscious of my own backside and how it was sticking up in the air for all to see. I could understand now why Poacher's bottom was a fairly common problem. We went along on our hands and knees for 100 yards. Now, my father said, we got to our feet and ran. A few minutes later, we came out through the hedge into the lovely open safety. It went marvellously, my father said. Didn't it go marvellously? Did he see us? I asked. Not on your life. In a few minutes the sun will go down. The birds will be flying up to roost, and he'll be going home for his supper. We'll be picking them up like pebbles. He sat down on the grassy bank below the hedge. I sat close to him. He put an arm around my shoulder, and he gave me a hug. You did well, Danny, he said. I'm right proud of you. And that's the end of chapter 14. Chapter 15 next time.